Hello and welcome to SaaS Council, a podcast where we review SaaS companies, talk about trends in the industry, and more. I'm Oscar Hernandez, joined as always by Udit Goenka, founder of PitchGround.com, where you can grab amazing software for up to 95% off. Let's talk SaaS.
Hey SaaS people, what's up? How's it going? In this episode of SaaS Council podcast, we will be talking about building an 100% remote SaaS company and culture. So let's get started. Oscar, why you should go and build an 100% remote company in 2020 and moving forward?
Hey, Udit. Yeah, there are many advantages of building a 100% remote company. Now, there are some challenges, and we are going to talk about that in a little bit. But I would say that the number one reason to go 100% remote is just flexibility. As a business owner, you will have the flexibility of not having that kind of office overhead, unnecessary overhead that is really not required these days. In the old days, you had to bring your clients to your office, you'd show them around, you put them in a conference room and have a meeting with them just to show them that you had a real business. That was usually the consensus back when you were doing business. We're talking 15, 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. Nowadays, it's very common for people to meet at a WeWork or any kind of co-working space or shared office or something like that. Or now with COVID, after the pandemic hit, obviously people are not meeting in person anymore. So even more of a reason for you to consider working remotely 100%. You can save on that cost. That's one thing. Another type of flexibility that it gives you is that it opens the talent pool, right, to a global talent pool. Now, this is a very, how do I say, is a touchy subject for some people, especially in the United States, where they feel like, oh, companies are hiring remote people. It's not fair that we're getting passed up on for jobs because people overseas are taking the same job, lower pay or whatnot. That's not the case, especially with SaaS companies. Generally, with SaaS companies, what matters is the talent, your skill level, the amount of work that you're willing to put into a company. And those are the things that are really going to matter when it comes to building your SaaS business. Now, if you are limiting yourself to a city, even if it's a big city, like I live in Los Angeles, it's a pretty big city. There's a lot of tech people here, a lot of talent, of course, and other metropolitan areas as well across the United States and Europe. But that pales in comparison to having access to a global marketplace of people who are highly motivated, highly skilled, and ready to go to bat for you on a day to day basis. Another flexibility that it allows you is that it gives you and your employees flexibility in terms of schedule. People don't really want to work on that good old 9 to 5 schedule anymore. And if they do, they have the flexibility to do it while they're working remotely, if you're that kind of person. But most of the time, especially when you're dealing with developers, if you're dealing with people who code, people who work in marketing, usually these are people who are active for 18 hours a day. They'll work, take a break, take a meeting, go for a run, and come back and work. People are loving that kind of lifestyle, that flexible lifestyle. So that's very important. That's something that you really want to give your employees. So I would say that those are that's a very good reason to go remote, is to have that flexibility, not just for yourself as a business owner or as a business in general, but also for your employees. And that's going to create a better culture for you overall.
Definitely. I think two things that really inspired to PitchGround to go remote specifically was first, I've been a big time admirer of the founder of ConvertKit, Nathan Barry. And when he built out a 100% remote company, it was really inspiring for two major reasons. First, you get an access to the global talent pool, which is very difficult, especially if you're looking to hire good talents. And there is only so much good talent that is possibly available in your city. That was, first of all, very inspiring. Second, today the people really want the flexibility to work at their own time, at their own pace, and just focus on delivery. So when you give all of these things to your team, they would always outperform because they don't feel the pressure. And for me, that was very crucial. And I think PitchGround was purely built on these values and grounds where we focus upon ensuring that people get to work at their own flexibility at whatever time, as long as we're just focusing on results. So with that, let's move on to the next question, Oscar. What are some of the biggest challenges to build a remote culture?
Yeah, there are, like I said, we both mentioned the same, pretty much the same things when it comes to the reasons why you should do it. But here are some of the challenges, and I will say these are challenges that are not insurmountable. So what that means is don't get discouraged when you're hearing these challenges. In fact, there are challenges for every scenario in life and in business. So you don't want to let that discourage you from making the right choice if you can, especially if you're a SaaS founder, founding a SaaS company. Of course, there are different styles of management and what people can tolerate or ways that you've worked. So there are some founders, and I've run into people like this who are adamant about having an office space and having people come to work and having brainstorming sessions live and things like that. Even though arguably you can do that if you're going into a co-working space, for an example, like I mentioned earlier. One of the challenges, and the biggest challenge, I would say, when it comes to building a remote company is actually building out the right culture. And what I mean by that, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into this. It's very hard for human beings to police themselves. So I'm going to say that again, just so it sinks in. As humans, we don't have the innate ability to police ourselves. That is a learned skill. That's something we learn with time. A lot of people talk about, oh, you mature with time, or as you grow up, you'll grow out of certain things. Now, there are some people who are naturally talented and they may have it in them, and they may be self motivated from the beginning. Those are rare people, but they exist. We're not talking about those. We're talking about the rule, not the exception to the rule. So, what I mean by this, it gets very hard to motivate people to work and to work at a certain pace when you are remote. A lot of the times people get distracted by certain things and they're not really focused on work. At which point what you want to do is you want to see and talk to them, try to motivate them. And that's one of the biggest challenge for you to get everybody on the same page. Usually it's nice when you have a place of business that everybody's in. They call a meeting, you're meeting there for 1 or 2 hours, you hash things out, you get things done. When you're having remote meetings, oftentimes people won't have that kind of environment to work. So they'll have maybe their kids in the background, or the dog is barking, or they were told to take out the trash and they haven't done it. And it's like a bunch of pending tasks, or they're freaking out about. Generally, these are people who are not organized with their lives anyway. But there is a contrast to that when it comes to owning and operating a remote business. It's fairly easy to come and bring these things up. It's really easy to have a conversation, schedule one-on-one time, and set that kind of culture. Let them know that, hey, this is a situation. We see that. How can we help you get through these challenges? If you are interviewing people who are going to come and work for you, one of the good questions to ask is if they have an actual space to get work done. This is not 100% requirement, but it's always a good sign, a positive sign that someone is ready to get involved in a project fully if they have that kind of space already set aside for themselves to get this work done. That's one thing. And it's very hard to establish culture remotely, to empathize with employees, to really get on the same page. So you have to really be able to over communicate things. You have to constantly be on the lookout to make sure that people are actually getting what you're saying and they're paying attention in meetings and they're getting the work done. That takes a little bit of work, a little bit more work than it would otherwise if you would have them in front of you. But at the same time, it's a small challenge. And I think the benefits far outweigh those, to be honest with you.
For sure, but just to add a couple to whatever you have said, Oscar, I think one of the very important thing is to start documenting everything right from day one whenever you're trying to build a remote culture, and at the same time have a very clear cultural guide that you can prepare as founders, and you can hand over that guide to whoever is joining in your company so that they get to understand what sort of a culture that you're really building up. Because a good culture can make a lot of difference, and it can bring a lot of positivity among your team, and that's something that's very essential if you are running any sort of a business online in general, not just a SaaS business. So building that culture from day one is so very important. So for an example, we at PitchGround, we run a
Right.
weekly meeting. Every Monday, we jump on a Zoom call just to discuss the problems that we have, the solutions to it, and everyone is invited to share their views. And we are very open to letting everyone speak up and share their ideas. If we're doing something wrong, they should come up. If they have some brilliant idea, come up. So these things are very essential whenever you're building remote culture. And the moment you start building such culture, the team members, anytime a new member joins in, they pass that culture on to the people coming in continuously. And that is so very crucial whenever it comes to building remote culture. So now that we have spoken about remote culture, Oscar, let's talk about one of the most difficult topics for people: how to hire people remotely, and where to even find them.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we need to touch on. I think I will leave the where to you. I do want to talk about some of the things that you should be looking out for as you're trying to hire people remotely. There's a few things. I would say the first thing would be to be very observative and just learn about the person that you're trying to hire. Don't rush into just hiring just anyone. Do your due diligence, not just by looking at a resume or their cover letter or whatever, but notice the little things. Like, for example, how long do they take to respond to your emails? Are they quick about it? Are they precise about their answers? How are they answering? Are they giving you complete answers, or are they just giving you something just for the heck of it, or just to get get the task done? Those are the things you want to look out for. If somebody's taking a few days to respond to you without a good reason, or let's say you've given them some kind of project to test them, and I would touch on this in a little bit, and they take, I don't know, 2 3 days to answer you, that's really not acceptable. Regardless of what anybody's doing or how much work they have on top of them, they should be able to give you some kind of update that, hey, I'm still working on this, I've done XYZ. And they shouldn't leave you hanging. If they're leaving you hanging, either they have too much on your plate, at which case why even hire them, or two, they're not really that interested in working for you, and they are really just you're just not a priority at that time, or your company's not a priority at that time, in which case you got to move on. You have to also see how well they communicate during the interview process. It's just going to give you some insight into how well they'll communicate when they actually work with you and work for you. So those are things to look out for. Number two, I would say you should really ask the right questions when you're interviewing them. You should be obviously testing their skills, but also asking them, what is your experience working remotely? Oh, how much experience? How long have you been working remotely, if anything? That's one thing you should be asking for sure. Another thing you should be asking is what kind of tools they've used to complete and manage some kind of remote project, right? Are they familiar with the tools that you are using in your company? That's something that you definitely want to be asking. And another, I would say number three would be give them a test project, like I was talking about earlier. Especially if you're hiring developers, you definitely don't want to just not test. People can say, yeah, I know JavaScript. I've been working with JavaScript for X amount of years. I've used Node.js in the past. I've built applications using React or PHP or whatever, things of that nature. Give them a project, give them a test project. There are some SaaS out there that are right now some services that allow you to test for developers. You can use that, but you should also be looking into having your own small projects, or giving that same project to multiple different candidates and see who works it better, who takes a better angle, and move on from there.
Yeah, those were some absolute brilliant advice. In order, with regards to where to hire people, especially if you're looking to hire remote, there are two things. First, we strictly stick with hiring people on the basis of reference. So when we started building our team, we started asking for references, and we started building a team from the network that we had already built. So in case if you don't have a network, then my highest recommendation would be to use remoteok.com. A brilliant platform. The platform lets you post your job requirements and whatever position that you're looking to fill, and it spreads it across to the entire world. And you get to have a whole pool of talented and amazing people from around the world. And we have found some incredible people through Remote OK. So that would be my second recommendation. So moving on to the next question, Oscar, what are some of the challenges of getting the things done remotely?
Yeah, there are multiple challenges. And like anything, there are perks and there are challenges to any job. Working remotely comes with its own set of unique challenges. One of them, I would say, is people tend to overwork. And a lot of times, managers and SaaS founders, company owners, entrepreneurs, they are used to overworking and they don't see it as overworking. Like, for example, if we are working on an 18-hour day, I think you and I, that's pretty normal. You're not thinking twice about that. But not everybody can go at the same pace. And sometimes the issue is that people get overworked, they get overwhelmed, and the quality of their work starts going down. So that's one of the things that we see as a challenge working remotely. Another is, like I was touching on this earlier, is the prioritizing of work. A lot of the times we have several different projects or different parts of a project, that need to get done. You have to really communicate and, if possible, over communicate what it is that needs prioritizing. You need to give people direction. I would argue that if you are having a remote team, this is where your leadership skills really have to shine as a CEO or as head of the company, where you're really taking charge and letting people know what it is that they need to prioritize so that they can get it done. Another challenge is interruptions. I did touch on this earlier. People have the kids or pets, or there's a delivery, like whatever, in the middle of a meeting, things like that, or a sales call, which would be very embarrassing. But these things happen. It's just life is happening around us. And usually home is where life happens, not where work happens. And a lot of the people who work remotely work from home, the vast majority, of course. And so, yeah, having to contrast that, having a place and the time to really work and get your work done, that will help. Another challenge, and this is a bit on the human side, is you get a little bit lonely when you're working remotely. Usually, people that are used to, especially now that many people are being pushed to work remotely, not necessarily by choice. This onset of just getting work done by yourself in front of a computer, it has that mental challenge where you're feeling lonely. A lot of people relied on going to work for their social interactions for most of the day. They're used to going to the office, talking to people, maybe a little bit of gossip here and there, and was still getting some work done, or actually going out on the field and doing sales calls for salespeople like that. And now they're having to take those calls or remotely over Zoom or whatever the case may be. And loneliness can set in. So you got to watch out for that. I think to counter that, you should be social as you can with people that are around you. Try to just complement that. Try to work on yourself, keep your body healthy, and work on your mental health. That will help you just stay at peak performance. Another big issue with working remotely is communication and just people being out of the loop. This is why we have built certain software such as communication by Little SaaS, where we're allowing teams to be able to communicate in a much better way, in a cleaner way, to have a central point of communication, whether it be with from team member to team member or team member to customer or leads or prospect. Having that one place where you have all the communication that needs to get done, things that need to get talked about or that are discussed that you can share with everyone. Keeping everyone in the loop is very important, especially because you have people who are in different time zones. For an example, at PitchGround, I'm in the Pacific time. You're in Indian Standard Time right now. We have Lucas, our CTO, who is in Lithuania. He's in European time. So, and we have people all over the world, and it gets tough, right, to schedule meetings. Some people have to take meetings either really early or really late or at a random weird time. And so that's a challenge that you have to overcome. And for the most part, I think people just figure it out and they move on. Another thing I would say that's a challenge. It's just tech itself. There is lack of tech that actually gets things done properly when it comes to remote teams and managing remote teams. We do see a lot of SaaS that have come up. We do have a lot of SaaS that are like communication that I just mentioned, but we do have other SaaS that are taking care of like payroll and that are taking care of like time tracking or productivity tracking and things like that. That's coming up. Technology is actually quickly catching up into what our needs are, and of course, that's where the money is right now. We did speak about this, I think, in a previous episode. Those are the things I would say to counter that very quickly. Have backups, have a backup plan. If you are using XYZ app for this, make sure you have something else in the back pocket just in case that fails. Test things thoroughly and don't waste your team's time actually testing things. You have somebody that actually is testing whether things are working so that when you do have meetings, they are actually productive. That's what I would say.
Definitely, just to add a few more points to it, whenever you want to make sure that the work is getting done, Oscar was saying communication is very important. Make sure that you are thoroughly communicating with your team members and always build a sort of hierarchy and give people responsibility of each other, because when you do that and when you give each other the responsibility of each other, it helps you to increase your productivity drastically. So for example, Oscar knows what am I up to, I know what Oscar is up to, and we keep a check on each other to ensure that we at the top of the management are making sure that we ourselves are not failing the team at any point of stage, and we have to stay on top of the game because our team members and our entire team is looking up to us every single day. So we have to ensure that we do not fail at any point of stage. So that's something that's very important. Apart from that, what I would like to add is make that you use some sort of a project management tool. Can be anything, doesn't matter. Use something so that you can write down a list of tasks and the goals for each one. Because if you do not have a specific goal set up for each and specific month, it would be very difficult for you to accomplish. And when you do your team meetings, you would not know whether you have made a progress or whether you have not made a progress. So these things are very essential in order to ensure that you are getting the work done remotely. With that, we're going to come down to our final question and final topic of discussion today, Oscar. What are some of the essential softwares for remote operations?
Yeah, there are several. I don't know if I should go down a list of actual companies that we should get into it, or maybe I will. For things like internal documentation, for example, we launched an amazing SaaS, actually, that was just well received earlier in the year. I think it was around March, Archbee. Amazing SaaS, beautiful looking SaaS, works perfectly fine, has a great team behind it. I would highly recommend using this for internal documentation. Anything that needs to get documented and everything that needs to get documented should be documented. And this is one good place to do it, archbee.io. I would highly recommend it. And you also need, obviously, technology that will help you meet with your team. You can have video meetings or audio meetings, whatever it is. The obvious choice here is Zoom. We use Zoom all the time. And the reason we use Zoom all the time is because they have integrations with absolutely everything else that we use. And I'm just going to touch on those two things, but I will say this: when you're picking the technology, just like I was talking about Zoom right now, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you pick technology that's compatible with everything else that you're already using. I think I'll leave it at that. Those would be my top two things. What do you think? What would you recommend in terms of other SaaS that you should be using, other technology in your stack?
There are a couple of other tools that I would recommend. First would be Nifty Project Management tool. It's a brilliant software, brilliantly done. We love the UI UX and the flexibility of the software, and it really helps us to keep a check whether everyone within the team has been taking care of the respected work that they are supposed to, regardless of the time taken, so that when we come and jump on for our weekly meeting, we can go back and discuss whether we have made that progress. And if we haven't, then we really go and nail down to understanding what really went wrong in the previous weeks to ensure that the upcoming week is really very productive for us. And the second a recommendation would be either Zapier or Think Spider, which is and completely you to build an automated flow where you can connect different softwares and trigger your reminders and so many other automation flows. And Think Spider was launched on PitchGround last year, so that would be a high recommendation. Other than that, you can also use Zapier. So we use both of them within the company, so you can pick either one of them. Oscar, do you want to add anything else apart from this?
No, man, just want to say that I could not live without the automation tool. So that's a great pick right there. Definitely, like I was saying, make sure that whatever it is in your tech stack for your team, that it's interactive, that it's all interconnected in one way or another. Very good suggestions. One last thing I will say in closing is that you have to remember in business in general, and this is just business, we're not even talking about just SaaS itself or SaaS industry, in business overall. Remember that there's an old saying here. I don't know if you've heard this one before. I'm pretty sure I've said it. There's an old saying that goes, the fish rots from the head down. And what that means is that if top level management is not on top of their game, you cannot expect the entire team or the rest of the team that actually depend on their leadership to be on top of their game. If you're not answering emails, if you're coming up late to meetings or not showing up to meetings, if you're not doing what you said you're supposed to be doing, or if you're overworking, not handling your business, you cannot expect your team to handle their business. And in turn, you will see that happening. You have to, as an entrepreneur, work on yourself. Make sure that you are doing what you need to be doing to lead these people, especially when you're doing a 100% remote team. That is essential. So that would be the last thing that I would say.
Awesome, brilliant. And if you are looking to launch a SaaS, or if you have a SaaS which is in early stage, then feel free to reach out to us at support@pitchground.com, and we will love to talk about your SaaS. With that, we will be wrapping up this episode, and we will come back soon with a brand new episode. Until then, take care, everyone.